here in New York again at the Columbia University. I lectured here, I think, once again. It was in the 90s. This is the second time. Don't ask me which department, what was the subject. It's more than 20 years ago. I don't remember. But even, again, 20 years ago, Turkey was going through other turmoils. Turkey has the capacity to always generate a situation where you always think, oh, this is the worst situation. This is the worst situation, and I don't know what we're going to do this time after those elections. Probably many Turks felt similar things. So we are used to this kind of tension and heavy atmosphere. Unfortunately, we are trained to live in the midst of it. Before I kind of do and start this lecture, how many Americans are here? Okay, that gives me an idea. All right. Well, I'm an artist, mainly professionally. I'm a writer also, I'm a politician also, but I earn my life only from painting. I'm a professional artist. I've been living off my art for 35 years. Art is a difficult job, as you all know, and being a contemporary artist for any country in the world, it's a very hard job. It doesn't mean that always good art sells. It doesn't mean that what sells is good art. It doesn't mean that selling is important, or what's important is art history more important, which of course we say yes. It's a very complicated and very hard field. Like every dentist or every engineer will end up earning his life or her life from his or her profession. With art, many people study art or art history or art management, and they end up doing something like working in a PR company or doing any other thing, sometimes, unfortunately, very often, also unrelated to art. Other people, like in New York, they do other jobs or they have other formulas to sustain their lives, and they keep producing art and thinking art, even if they don't get the ways to earn their life from art, because this is a very wild field. Art is a very savage area, very harsh, without any mercy, and it's some of you that are, if they have friends or relatives who have been into arts, they know better what I'm talking about. So it's a difficult job anyway, but I've been doing my life even much more complicated than that. Because as our young friend said, I'm a writer also, and I write about politics. I've been writing about politics for more than 30 years, and I have an art center in the heart of Istanbul, Taksim, at the Taksim Square. And I have, it's called Pyramid, written in a special way, P-I-R-A-M-I-D. It's like the international phonetic version of it. There's a specific reason why it's called Pyramid. I'll tell you about it maybe slightly later. And besides that, I'm the president of Turkish Artists. I'm the International Artists Association Uluslararası Plastik Sanatlar Derneği. I've been the president for 11 years of professional Turkish artists, and for the past year and a half, I have been the president of the International Art Association, based with its headquarters in Paris. I'm the world president of all international art associations around the world. So these are more responsibilities and more headaches, as you can imagine, to the problems of being an artist. So you can say, well, why do you keep complicating your life? Well, that has no concrete or logical answer. Sometimes things happen. It will happen in your lives too, or sometimes I'm sure it does happen in your life too. You take one more weight on your shoulder, and you have your own ways of explaining why you did this. Maybe it's not logical, maybe other people wouldn't understand it, but this is how it goes. And I've been a political activist as soon as I came from the United States. I lived 5 years in the 70s in France, 75 to 80, and I lived 7 years in California, 80 to 87. And when I got back from California, well, I never lived in New York, but I had shows in New York during my Californian years. I had shows in New York. One of my close artist friends from those years is here. Rene, you can say hello, with his dear wife Joanne. So I used to come and have shows in New York. I can only stay, let's say, 1 month at a time in New York. The aggression of New York kind of makes that I want to go back to California or Istanbul, or I don't know, somewhere lost in the ocean, but the tension of New York is too harsh on me. But I know the New York speed and lifestyle. And as soon as I got back from California, I took the decision to start living in Turkey. 2 months later, what I saw was that the Iranian prime minister who was visiting Turkey was having, he said, I don't want to go and visit the mausoleum of Atatürk. Atatürk, the founder of the Turkish Republic, of modern Turkey, the father of the Turks. I thought that he would be sent back to his country with the first plane with such a harsh, arrogant behavior. No, Özal, who was the prime minister then, said, well, it doesn't matter, you can go to Konya and visit Mevlana's house or the whirling dervishes. It doesn't matter if you don't want to visit Atatürk's mausoleum. And I thought that all Turks would be in the street to protest against the government, is that, you know, how could you be so disrespectful to the founder of a country and still want to do business with us or whatever. And I saw that Turks did not react much. Only the opposition party left some black type of protest flowers in front of the Iranian embassy. So at that moment, I realized that if Turkey could give officially this kind of concession, it was unavoidable that Turkey was going to sink in a very dangerous Islamicist spree, and that secularism and democracy were going to suffer, or that they were going to hire more and more, maybe in official, for the official jobs, they were going to hire more people that are from the Islamist way of thinking, etc. And Özal had made life easier for the Islamist population by giving access to Islamic banks in those days in Turkey, to Islamic banks specifically, and it made their life easier for their access and their personal operations with a growing financial means for a different Turkey that was set in motion other than the typical Turks who had been living their regular life since the 1920s under Atatürk. So since that day, my art became half political. I started writing articles, I started giving conferences, and it was a very already tense atmosphere, many threats, many tensions. In those days, the girls did not have the right to wear the veil at the university. So there were many tensions around that, and there were many threats against Kemalist writers. For Americans that don't know it, a Kemalist writer, like I'm one of them, is a writer who defends the ideas of Atatürk and in the 20th or 21st century, and who believes in the ideas of Atatürk or in secularism and democracy as a pair that cannot be divided. And unfortunately, for people who see religion as a way of making threats or using violence, we became the easy targets. So I thought that in California I had spent my struggling artist years between 80 and 87. But after I got back to Turkey, I realized that actually the struggling parts would never end. So there's the struggling artist years, then even if you become successful, the struggle continues, and you kind of realize that life is hard, then you die. Or art is hard, then you die. And I've been writing because of this, especially because of this political motives since 1987. And I started writing also when I was in the States. I wrote about against Western cultural imperialism. That's a parenthesis I want to open. When I lived in the States, I realized that a lot of the art museums in the West, may it be American or French or German, Italian, they carried mostly the art from 5 rich nations: France, England, Germany, Italy, United States, and to the rest of the world they behaved as if, oh, maybe we can have a look at your ancient culture or your calligraphy or the African masks or the South American the South American motifs or the Aztecs and Inca culture, but don't bother us with your contemporary art. Don't bother us with this field belongs only to us. And I wrote a manifesto which was a pioneer in this field. Edward Said's book Orientalism was in '78, which I found out later about. But my manifesto distributed at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, criticizing this issue during the opening of an so-called international exhibition, with only 5-6 nations represented, was like a first in this field, criticizing the fact that there was a very undemocratic situation, and that the arts world was supposedly doing international shows with only 5 rich nations, as if like rich kids had to play with, because they bought the ball and they owned the tennis court or the football field, so they wanted to play alone, and they said, don't bother us. It was that kind of summary that I could make. And it was a very pioneer act. Even some of my Turkish friends couldn't know how to handle this information, or they said, "Are you sure? Aren't you making a mistake? You're going to be crossed out?" And I said, "No, well, I know what I'm doing, and I know that the things I'm saying are right, and also I know that the roots of modern art come mainly from Southern and Eastern cultures, may it be the calligraphy, or may it be African art, or may it be Far East brushstrokes, or may it be, you know, South American art, oceanic art. So we know all the roots of modern art and where they come from. So I'm very sure of what I'm saying. I have no regrets. I'll just go ahead and make those protests, write those articles, raise hell in front of museums, which I did, you know. So I have been a cultural guerrilla since '84 in those young years. So what I was trying to say is that when I was in the States, this is again politics. So it's not directly like the other politics I was telling you about regarding Islamic fundamentalism, but it's a politics which is fighting against cultural imperialism, which is another important form of political duality and situation that becomes, unfortunately, an important issue. If you're an artist that carries a passport from another country, what happened? They don't want artists to talk. Okay. I've been also involved very heavily in Turkish politics, as I said, after '87. Turkey had gone through the coup d'etat of 1980, so people were longing for more democratic days towards the end of the '80s. So they wanted, in a way, they wanted to have all types of free laws. And communism propaganda was forbidden in Turkey, and so was Islamic fundamentalist propaganda forbidden. The laws forbidding communist propaganda in the penal code were laws 141, 142, and the other one was 163, forbidding the propaganda of the law of Sharia in Turkey. So we made a campaign. We saw that CHP, which was the party of Atatürk, was closed after the coup d'etat. Another party was formed, the SHP, which was another social democrat party. And there was also, again, the party of the ex-president of CHP, which was a famous politician, Ecevit. And so another reason I was so well immersed in politics was that I was born in a very political family. For instance, my father had founded the youth league of CHP for the first time, and he was the founder president of that party's youth league, and Ecevit had been his secretary when he was president, and so was Altan Öymen, who was going to become another president. And so was Yekta Güngör Özden, who was going to become the head of the Constitution Court. So, and İnönü, who was the second president. My father was like his right hand, being in the parliament. So all these important issues had been discussed in our home as I was growing up. Turkish politics were kind of discussed in our house in its most critical moments. So probably this was, again, another reason why I was so involved in politics, besides doing art all my life. But so in the 80s, in Turkey, to understand what's happening in Turkey today, you have to understand the big mistakes done in Turkish politics, and you have to understand what made that today we are facing the situation where there's a referendum coming, as as our American friends might have heard also, on the 16th of April, and this referendum suddenly is going to say yes or no. In a way, they say no. It's not. It's not like a coup d'état. It's not a change of regime. It's just a different system of running the country. They're trying to minimize the change, whereas many people, including the artists, the writers, the thinkers, us, maybe many of you here, believe that it's a very dangerous turn of cards, and that democracy is probably not going to survive if the answer of the referendum is yes, and if so much power is given to the actual president of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan. So how did we get to that position, coming from a country that had always turmoils, up and downs, sometimes coup d'etats, sometimes coalitions, or sometimes leftist and rightist youth killing each other and having political tensions. But this was like kind of Turkey's regular life. How come suddenly, in a span of 2-3 decades, Turkey got to become this country where democracy and freedom of press and human rights has been so much a loser, losing so much territory, losing so much weight, and that Islamic fundamentalism or racism gaining so much strength? So the main mistake, one of the first mistakes, was this law 163 from the Penal Code, when it was lifted with a desire of more democracy in 89-90. What happened was that all these youngsters could, since they were 1 year, 2 year, 3-year-old, in the radios, televisions, newspapers, they would be listening to programs where they kept hearing Atatürk has been an enemy of religion, and he did this and he did that, and secularism means hating religion, and this country is not our country. We have to find back our Ottoman or Islamist roots, and this republic does not reflect us. All this propaganda has been worked to those kids since they were 2 or 3-year-old. Now, you have now ISIS militants killing maybe either through a machine gun, as it happened at New Year's in Turkey, or by exploding themselves, you know, like in the Ankara train station. You know, all these militants killing each other, exploding with bombs. How did they get so much brainwashed? How did they get to that position where for the cause they are ready to give their life? Because they have been brainwashed since with that law change in 88, 89, 90, especially I think it was at turn of 89 and 90 that this law was lifted. It became their lifestyle to be born and going to school and getting a Quranic education and reading newspapers, magazines, and being subject to radios, televisions, where all this propaganda kept reaching them. And when they kill themselves being suicide bombers, they believe that they're going to go to heaven and start living and till infinity, till the end of times, with 80 houris, 100 houris, like these are the ladies you find in heaven. And they really, you see, it's not a joke. They believe that
the moment they kill themselves, they're just making their passage to this new life in heaven with endless women, endless pleasure. And you might have seen again on internet that some of these people, the moment or they go to such hot war zones or before they kill themselves, some of them protect their sexual organ with a cement base because they want to reach heaven maybe with an organ that would be protected. But you see, it's sad. I don't even want to make fun of them. So when leftist politicians or Democrat politicians say, oh, we are very Democrat, everything should be free. So everything should be free, and the propaganda of Sharia and the propaganda of anti-Kemalism or anti-Republic should be free as well. It sounds like a very Democrat and very thoughtful and libertarian way of thinking, and for a politician, a very nice way of looking at freedom and freedom of thought. But when what you get in return becomes this brainwashing, who sees all those other persons that doesn't think like them as enemies that should be eliminated, annihilated, getting rid of, being killed as soon as possible, then you must question your concepts of what is democracy, what is freedom of speech, what is free thinking, etc. Unfortunately, we saw those issues and we warned the politicians. I talked hours and hours in those days with Erdal İnönü, who was the president of SHP. CHP was not reopened yet after it was closed by the coup d'etat. I talked with Ecevit, and many other people talked with Ecevit. Ecevit, not only he refused that, but Ecevit did not want to unite with the other social democrat parties. So after the coup d'etat, before the coup d'etat in Turkey, there was one main center-left party, which was the party founded by Atatürk, the party I've been talking about, CHP. After the coup d'etat, there was three of them: SHP, CHP that reopened, and DSP, which is the party that was installed by Ecevit, the ex-president of CHP, before the 1980 coup d'etat. So suddenly, one party became three parties, and the law of ban 163 was lifted, the brainwashing had started, and we were going fast into some municipal elections. Now you might say, why is this guy talking to us about some municipal elections that happened in Turkey in 1994? Well, unfortunately, again, this is what ties directly to today's dilemma of the coming referendum. In 1993, I had started a movement called Taban Operasyonu, which meant like the popular movement, coming from the ground, the roots. And we said we were the writers, journalists, syndicate leaders, lobby pressure group presidents of the main groups that had formed in 89-90, like Atatürkçü Düşünce Derneği, the Association of Atatürk's Thoughts, or Çağdaş Yaşamı Destekleme Derneği, which was the association in support of contemporary living. Just because the Turkish politicians did not see the danger of Islamic fundamentalism growing, those associations, one run by Türkan Saylan, Çağdaş Yaşam Derneği, and the other one run by Muammer Aksoy, ex-politician and a man of law, they started growing very much. And so we were this Taban Operasyonu movement, we warned the politicians, the parties divided in three. We said, if you don't unite, the Islamic fundamentalist movement in politics is going to win the municipal elections. Then they're going to get, then they're going to have access to a lot of money in the municipalities. With this, they're going to gain the legislative elections. Then after this, with all the power they get, and when they start running the country in the parliament, then they will change the regime of Turkey, because they say it clearly that they are against secularism, thus against democracy, thus against Kemalism, thus against the contemporary lifestyles, the freedom of speech, freedom of art, and equality to women, and etc. We could not convince the leaders of our political parties. I talked personally to each of them. Ecevit answered to us the first day. He said, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Count me out. That's precisely what he said in the fax he sent us. I led personally the bargainings, in brackets, between Bedri Baykam, head of CHP, and Murat Karayalçın, the head of SHP, because Erdal İnönü had resigned and Murat Karayalçın, what now was running the party SHP. And we said, either unite or get an entente on the same, even if you don't unite as parties, choose the same candidates for this election. Or if you don't want to do that either, let's say that one party, CHP, can run in Ankara, Izmir, Adana, and the other one, SHP, will run in Istanbul, Bursa, Mersin. Just divide your territories, but don't be adversaries to each other. It was mathematical. It's very simple. Don't divide your votes, because then you're going to lose. What happened is, with all the pressure we put, all the energy and goodwill, and as no matter how much we explained them what was going to happen and the big risks for the country in the near future, which is now an unfortunate reality, they said no, and they didn't shake hands. So with 1.3 difference, 1.3% difference, Erdogan won in Istanbul. He became mayor of Istanbul, and Melih Gökçek won with like 0.2% difference, and he became mayor of Ankara, and he is still mayor of Ankara. And Erdogan, after this, became, as you know, the leader of AKP, and became prime minister, and he became president, and now he wants to become president and chief of the army and president of his own party and prime minister and president, and that leads maybe, I don't know, to where else would it lead? To a Khalife, or I don't know. So all this was started by the suicidal lack of dialogue and lack of comprehension between the leaders that were supposed to represent the Social Democrat Turkey, the CHP, or the party of Atatürk. And that was very sad, because the total votes of the Social Democrats, SHP, CHP, and of course Ecevit, was passing the Refah Partisi, which was the fundamentalist party then, by 15%, 18%, and of course they lost. And the funny thing is that the center-right did the same mistake between ANAP and Doğru Yol, the two center-right parties. They also did not want to unite, so the municipalities of Ankara and Istanbul and other big cities were offered on red carpet to the Islamist fundamentalists by irresponsible politicians who each wanted to be the one, the mayor, the big guy, the important party. You know, nobody made a concession, and none of them could read the future except us, the lobby pressure groups and the writers and the university professors who explained them what was going to happen. Now, I'm not going to go that deep in continuously explaining, but to cut the long story short, in 2002, when AKP was formed and Erdogan became the leader of AKP, he had a split from Erbakan, who was the ex-leader of the Islamic fundamentalists. He got 33% of the votes in 2002, but he got 2/3, around 66% of the seats in the parliament. With 1/3 of the votes, you get 2/3 of the seats. It's good business, isn't it? It's very practical. So unfortunately, the reason for that was that 10%, as you know, was the limit. Any party getting less than 10%, all those votes were wasted, gone down the drain, flush with the toilet, means that they were zero. So in those about 25-30% votes went to parties that did not pass, the 10%, 3 parties. So all these votes were redivided to the parties, and they were added to the parties that went into the parliament. So this is how AKP won 2/3 of the seats and became the country that was ruling Turkey. And since then, they have been ruling Turkey. Now, again, I'm not going to go into the details of how many different mistakes the Turkish left made. And for instance, as soon as AKP became the reigning party in Turkey, the businessmen and some of the writers and journalists started backing up AKP, because since 91-92 there was a movement called the Second Republicans in Turkey. The Second Republicans were not Islamists. They were drinking whiskey, they were living the good life, they were living the Western lifestyle, they were getting advantage of all the Turkish Republic's benefits, but they were enemies of Atatürk. They were enemies of the Republic. They were saying, well, you know, Turkish women, their equality was given to them. They didn't have to fight for it. So, well, so it's bad. I mean, can you believe that? Just because Turkish women maybe didn't have to go into a civil war or fight or die, and just their equality and equal rights were given by Atatürk in the 30s. Now this was like becoming a bill. Or they were saying, well, you know, Atatürk cut us from our you know, roots, and we started not being able to read ancient Turkish, Arabic, so we lost our culture. He changed us to Latin alphabet. So the issue is, hey, do you know that the ratio of people who knew how to read and write before the Kemalist revolution was like this, so low, and then after the Kemalist revolution, it quadrupled, it quintupled, and this is not true either. So all these men different. Oh, Atatürk was a dictator. Atatürk was this. Atatürk was bad. Oh, he was. This is just the resmi ideology. What we have been taught in schools is the official ideology, is not the real history. The real history is this, the real history is that, re-questioning everything. So we kept telling them, hey, my friend, you are cutting the tree branch on which you are sitting. You're gonna fall with it. This is what we have been telling them and writing them and explaining them. Later, in 2010, when for one, those journalists kept saying, oh, Erdogan is going to put Turkey in Europe. He's making very many reforms. Turkey is going to be part of Europe and it's going to be great. And you guys don't understand anything because your vision is so short and you are poor Kemalist thinkers, and you don't understand that this West from 1930 is now too small. We cannot wear it. We have to emancipate. We have to open ourselves. We have to open to the Kurds, to the Islamists. We have to open to the Sharia, or we have to open to anybody should be able to wear anything he wants or she wants, whatever. Just stop your, indoctrinating attitudes, etc. In those days, I wrote a book, which you have here. It's called Avrupa Biletiyle Tahran'a. On the road for Tehran with a European ticket. They made believe the Turkish people that AKP was taking them in this train to Brussels, to Paris, to Luxembourg. No, the train was going to Riyadh or Tehran. And we explained them in this book, not only with my writings, but with newspaper experts from excerpts from what Erdogan and his party had been doing and saying. I was proving them how this train was going to Tehran and not Europe. No, the Second Republicans kept believing in them, and they controlled, unfortunately, most of the press and media that Turkey has been reading, has been following. So the main central press, besides Cumhuriyet or Aydınlık or Bir Gün, smaller newspapers from the left, or now Sözcü, all the main newspapers had been controlled by those Second Republicans, and they never really wanted any of us to write democratically in the same newspapers. So, or be part of these hardcore discussions in these issues, or run the televisions, etc. They really made some walls so that the Kemalist thinking stayed out of CNN Turk, NTV, Hürriyet, Milliyet, Vatan, etc. The main newspapers and the main media. In 2010, Erdogan made his first constitutional referendum. And this referendum was the beginning of the end. And with this referendum, the law structure of Turkey and the high magistrates, the high court members started becoming dependent on the Ministry of Justice controlled by the Prime Minister, etc. We warned them, we explained them, we made drawings, we made, look, who is elected by who. This is this political party choosing this to the Constitution Court, and this is how you lose the independence of the law system. The judiciary system starts becoming dependent on the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Justice, the President, who also elects, becomes this, becomes that. We explained them everything. And those Second Republicans who controlled our medias, they said, yetmez ama evet, which meant this is not a sufficient reform, but we still endorse it. We say yes to the referendum. Now, we are in 2017. 7 years have passed. Those Second Republicans who in 2010 became the ones who kept endorsing these new proposals of Erdogan and AKP. Right now, unfortunately, don't ever think that I would be happy for that. Now they are either in prison, those Second Republicans and those endorsers of Erdogan's 2010 referendum reform,
in brackets. They are either in jail, or they have no newspaper to write, or they have fled the country and they live in other countries, or the remaining 25% is in panic and they're making campaigns for saying no in the referendum of April 16, 2017, which is coming in a month and a half, or something like that, in a month and a half. So, unfortunately, time has proven us right. This train was not going to Europe. This train was not going to more democracy. This train was not going to more freedom. And unfortunately, this train now wants to reach a destination where, with this referendum, if this referendum passes in Turkey, there will be the members of the parliament will become like public notaries, just signing and accepting what the president has decided for them. The Constitutional Court, or again the High Court officials, will be chosen, some by the leader of the ruling party, which is the same person. Then the leader of the ruling party is going to take out his jacket and put a second jacket, which is the president's jacket, and then he's going to choose another 6 names. And then you will see that the same person, by changing jackets, is ruling the high courts, the Constitution Court, the Turkish army, his own party. He's running the government. He's choosing the ministers, not from the elected deputies, but he can nominate them from the outside. He has the right to nominate them. He has the right to take away their seat. He has the right to nominate any other person. He has the right to abolish and close the parliament. He has the right to, of course, to rule the état-major, the army of the country. He has the right to everything. There is no other situation that controls this president, who in Turkey, in the special case of Turkey, is also tinted with an unspoken religious strength. We know that in our case, although the country is supposedly secular, it's been a long time since the prime minister or the president goes with all his ministers to the Friday prayers, and it becomes like unfortunately, religion becomes like a show-off within politics, and it's as if this country has never had such a situation, not even during the Ottoman Empire, where the Padishah had his vizier, his grand vizier, and he had his sadrazam, and there were also the old man assemblies giving their advice and having their weight in nominations, etc. None of those are now existing. If 16th of April referendum gets a yes, then the summary is this: you choose one person, the president, and then he chooses everybody else for you. There's nothing left for you to choose. You choose one person, and then he chooses the rest, and he rules the country as he wants. Now, I will tell you about
actually, in the political books, there is here the tensions lived in the book Ordu Satranç Oynarken. This is a book around the tensions lived during the Erbakan era. The en route to Tehran with a European ticket is unfortunately the summary of how the Second Republican press kept brainwashing the Turkish society and made them believe that this government was taking Turkey to a much universal standards of democracy. And also the other book called Sivil Diktaya Hayır, means no to a civilian dictatorship, was the book that had come out before the referendum of 2010. My new book regarding this referendum is in fabrication, again, for this no of this year and this context. But the point is, the situation of Turkey, in summary, is that one party, one movement, has unfortunately used all the weaknesses of democracy to get rid of democracy. You know, this is the summary of the situation. Oh, let them. In the beginning, when they say, it sounds very logic. You want to wear the veil, she should be able to wear the veil, you know, because let everybody wear the clothes they want. It sounds very logic, right? But on the other hand, they fire the women who wear miniskirts in municipalities, or they ask them not to come to the municipalities with sleeveless shirts, or they ask them not to have décolleté, you know, like with an, I don't know how you say it in English. Sorry? Cleavage. Okay. So, unfortunately, everything goes only one way. In democracy in Turkey in the past 25, 30 years, the word democracy has been used only for the rights of women to wear the veil, first in the university, then in the professor's seat, then in the parliament, then now in the army. This is democracy. Or the right to send your kid, even when they are 3, 4, 5, 6, to Quranic schools. And then they say, oh my God, there's been this religious sect. They made a coup d'etat, 15th of July. Then what did you expect? What did you expect? You send all these kids to people that are beyond your control to brainwash them about houris, about killing themselves, about religion, who unfortunately use violence or brainwashing against the republic or against democracy or against Atatürk. So what did you expect? Of course that another sect was going to use religion against you. The FETÖ situation, the Fethullah Gülen situation, the Pennsylvania situation of probably our American friends who kind of know Turkey. They know that there has been this coup d'etat in Turkey in 15th of July. And many of you asked the question, was this a real coup d'etat? Okay. You've been talking about this. The world has been talking about this. My look, although I've been in political opposition to the rise of Islamic fundamentalism and of the Erdogan movement so long, I say it was a real coup d'etat. I believe it was real. I believe it was real because the reason why I believe this is that this Fethullah Gülen movement, with all its very stupid people tied to this Pennsylvania pyramidal situation, why should they give their life, their belongings, their estate, their money, in a scenario that would end up making Erdogan stronger. Why would they play a coup d'etat if it wasn't real and lose their family, go to prison, lose their money, lose their estate, lose their life, just to make Erdogan stronger? A scenario. No, I don't believe it. I believe it was a real coup d'etat. But then, if it was a real coup d'etat, is Turkey now a country that has stopped sending its 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds to uncontrolled religious schools and Quranic schools, or are those kids still being brainwashed by other hojas or other religious sect movements? No, this has not been stopped. So now maybe some other type of Fethullah Gülen type of stories are underway. Because once you start mixing religion and politics, once you start trying to shape the future generations by brainwashing them against this or that ground foundations of the republic or of the who's going to rule the country, then you cannot determine whether they're going to become just enemies of the Republican Atatürk. So many of them have become enemies of Erdogan as well. You don't have the right to be surprised. This is the situation that was created by the infiltration of Islamic fundamentalism in Turkish politics. Now, I'm for Fenerbahce. It's a football club. And as you might know, Turks are divided between 3 clubs, mainly. Fenerbahce, Beşiktaş, Galatasaray, and then there are other smaller clubs. Now, whether I belong to Fenerbahce or Galatasaray, does it matter when I do politics? If I'm going to choose this person because he's a very good architect in my municipality, will I ask, are you from Galatasaray or Fenerbahce? No. I'm just going to say, are you a good architect? And I will check the credits. Or are you a good banker? Or are you a good landscape architect? Or I will ask if you're a good doctor, if you're a good economist. I will not ask the football club. But unfortunately, Turkey has become a country where people are hired not according to their values in their profession and their standards in their profession, but according to their political inclinations and according to their political or ethnic belongings. Now, this is really a sad situation for the country. And this is how Turkey has been losing ground, and no real philosophical discussion finds its way in Turkey. No real scientific or technologic or artistic discussion finds its place in Turkey, because we have to talk all the time about religion. We have formed a political system where all the issues that advanced countries like Western countries or Holland or Sweden or France have been discussing, we don't discuss them anymore. We have only to discuss the issues brought by the tensions regarding the pieces of land that Islamist fundamentalism wants to conquer in politics or in terrorist actions. Now, the terrorist actions are led by Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Daesh, whatever you call it. It comes to the same thing. They just don't want democracy. They just don't want freedoms. They just don't want equality of women. They just don't want art. They just don't want sculptures. They just don't want monuments. They just don't want the Atatürk's revolution and reforms. Now, the moment you infiltrate, this is why I talked about football, about soccer. The moment you infiltrate religion, or the different sects, or the different Alevi, Sunni, Shia differences, etc., within the society, there is no way this society is not going to be divided. There is no way this society is going to breathe together, or feel as a nation, or believe in its future. No way. You start dividing the country according to ethnicity and religion, you end up making a mess that is uncontrollable. Turkey, before 1980 and after 1980, as I explained, the growth has been two different places. Of course that there has always been ethnic differences, but those were not enhanced. They were not put forward. They were not accentuated. They were, on the contrary, underplayed for bringing together the country. And now, not only we have fabricated this situation, but we want to give all the power to a single man who, in his own words, have been, what's the word in English? Duped? Kandırılmak? Yes? Okay. Kandırıldım. By who? He has been led falsely to believe the FETÖ people, the Abdullah Öcalan people, or the European politicians, and every time he says, I have been duped. And he admits it. He says, I'm sorry, I have been duped. Okay, I respect him. You know why? We all can be duped by other people. One lady can make me believe that, I love you, you're the best person in the world, you're the strongest man I met, fantastic. He can dupe a man, and maybe this person can divorce from his wife and trust this woman. Maybe later he'll realize that this woman only wanted his money, his fame, this and that. It happens to everybody. The human makes mistakes. That's why there are checks and balances. That's why there has to be a division of powers that control each other. There are mechanisms that control each other. They say, oh, so what? You're against the presidential system. Well, in the America, it's the same in the United States. No, it's not the same in the United States. Of course, America is going through a much lighter version of what we are going through with Trump. Trust me, it's a much lighter version. Much, much lighter. Yesterday night, I heard on television Americans who were talking about Trump. You will be able to tell me the names, Rene, of the intellectuals. Tell me which ones of them. They were saying, oh, he's stupid, he's doing this, he's doing that. In Turkey, you say that about any politician, you go to jail 10 years, 20 years, or you pay this much money. Here, you still have the right to say, to criticize, to talk, say, oh, this is stupid, this is rubbish, this is ridiculous, and then use other words. Who were those?
Michael Moore, Kathy Griffin,
Madonna.
Yeah. Anyway, so we cannot live this, you know. In Turkey, people who are saying no are being, unfortunately, beaten in the street by cops. Or in Samsun, the governor of Samsun stopped the youth of making a campaign for no, and he said, no, you don't have the right. Why? Only political parties have the right to do this kind of propaganda. It's ridiculous. Political parties are not even involved. This referendum is about people, individuals. It has nothing to do with parties. For instance, the CHP is not using even its flag. It's only doing it with the people. And this is the decision of the people. It's not the decision of the political parties, you know. And unfortunately, we're going to a referendum under OHAL, which is extraordinary, sorry? State of emergency, because of extraordinary measures are taken, olağanüstü hal. And not only we're going through this phase where all liberties are mostly suspended anyway, we are in the middle of a situation where those interdictions, as we are approaching the referendum, are growing. They don't want any oxygen, to leave any oxygen to any people who make the propaganda of no. Whereas the so-called law people, police officers, and many other people who work for the state, or the governors that represent the state, they make an open propaganda of yes. Whereas normally they don't have that right. And normally Erdogan does not have the right either to make a propaganda for yes. Because he is supposed to be the impartial president. He was selected by the Turkish voters as the impartial president. He swore that he was going to be an impartial president. Unfortunately, he swore, but he is openly partial, and he also said on television a week ago, or 10 days ago, nobody can be impartial. Everybody is partial. Everybody has his own ideas. But he had sworn that he was going to be impartial. Now, how technically he can make a propaganda for no, it's not understandable for me. Turkey is living this crisis of presidency because of the party of Grey Wolves, the nationalist movement party, Milliyetçi Hareket Partisi. Now, this party's leader had been calling AKP and Erdogan all sorts of names that I would never dare repeating you here, because they're not political terms. They're very, how do you call it? You know, bad words, illegal words. Let me just say only this much. I would never be able to repeat them, and if anybody repeats them in Turkey, he would go to jail. This is as harsh he was against Erdogan and his desires for becoming president. You have all been, I guess, following this on Facebook, on YouTube, in Instagram, everything that Devlet Bahçeli had been saying. Now suddenly, out of the blue, some 6 months ago, Devlet Bahçeli switched. He suddenly took the table, put it upside down. He suddenly switched from white to black, from south to north. He started saying, oh, Erdogan is our only man and our most important person, and we have to make him president, and we are ready to sacrifice anything, and bringing Erdogan to our presidency is going to protect our nation. What happened? We don't know. If any of you understood, please tell me. You understood?
Yeah, he offered like a vice presidency.
Yeah. So is this enough reason?
To him, I think because he knows that he's not going to be able to be a president of Turkey for the rest of his life. So being a vice president is a good deal with him internally. So he starts supporting him out of nowhere.
Please, if you see Bahçeli, tell him. if you see Bahçeli, tell him that the Yetmez Ama Evet and the Second Republican journalists had similar aspirations and similar dreams. that maybe they were going to become the European minister of Turkey or whatever, and now they're counting days in jail. Now, please tell Mr. Bahçeli that his dreams might not always come true, and Erdogan is a master in using the weaknesses of people and giving them hopes and dreams, and then manipulating the situation with a very dexterous, very capable politician who succeeds in returning every situation to his own benefit. So please tell Mr. Bahçeli that the situation might not be as clear as he thinks it would be. Yeah.
Sarayı üstüne alacak o yüzden.
Sorry?
Sarayı üstüne alacak.
Yeah, I know the joke. The joke says that maybe he's gonna give the 1,000-room palace as a gift to Bahçeli. It's a nice internet joke. Now, Erdogan constructed I think 1,100-room palace for himself 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. What would happen if Trump said, I'm going to, I don't like the White House. What does it mean? House, it's small. I want a palace. Even Turkey has a 1,000-room palace. I'm the president of the United States. I want a 5,000-room palace, and I'm going to annex this part of this forest, and we're going to make a huge 5,500-room palace. Would Americans let him do that?
No.
I have a question. Go ahead.
I think so.
What?
The way this is happening today, he can.
You think he could do? Okay. You might be right. We will see. What do you think?
I think Republican senators and congressmen would allow him, but actual Democratic people would actually go, thousands of people would go to the forest and like not let the construction machines construct the house.
Yes, in Turkey, in similar situations, they send troops of police with biber gaz and job and beyaz kurşun and sometimes solid kurşun. And then, you see, that's the difference of democracy. Probably American police would not be able to attack 100,000 people. That's the difference. Could be. Now, I understand why, Renee, you say that they could, it would not be impossible if this United States would say yes to this 5,500 room palace, and if Trump hears us by any chance, he might say, hey, it's a good idea, why not?
He's an idiot.
Yeah. The funny thing,
He established that he's crazy, he's an idiot, he doesn't think. And what he has said during the campaign, that he can walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot anybody and they're not going to do anything to him because he's Donald Trump. Or he can grab any woman's genitals because he's Donald Trump. And, you know, if I say that, I would be in jail right now.
Yeah.
So he can do it and he can do anything he wants. And he has the Senate and he has the Congress behind him. What do you do?
in Turkey, Erdogan started constructing this palace when he was a prime minister. And they called this construction the new office of the prime minister, Başbakan. But as the situation changed and he became a candidate for presidency and he became president actually, suddenly the law switched and this 1,100 room palace became the presidential palace. How come? Normally, Mr. Binali should have sit there. Or the other one before him, Davutoğlu, should have sat there. No. Nobody has the right to open the word, say a word against him. Okay. Now, the situation is, this is a moment in Turkish history that's honestly more than critical. We have had extremely harsh moments, elections, mistakes done by the left, mistakes done by the center-right, mistakes done by the press, by the intellectuals, but this is really this. Now, on the other hand, for Turkey, a person that admits that he has done so many mistakes wants all of the power. This means that the transatlantic of Turkey, with all its ministries, all its law system, all its army, all its internal problems, and a budget of billions and billions of dollars will be given to one single person. If I ask any of you, my dear relative here, it is like, if I ask you to control the money of everybody within the Baykam family, how would you feel? Wouldn't you feel in panic? I guess you would feel in panic. If one single person, no more court of accounts, no more Sayıştay, no more Danıştay, no more parliament control, one single person is going to control all the budget of Turkey. His son-in-law is the Ministry of Energy. Interesting. Budget, huge. People say, what's next? Now, when Aliyev made his wife vice president, I hope he's not going to get an inspiration on that. I don't know. So, my guess is that it's too much of a job for one single human being. This is not an issue of Erdogan. I'm not talking about Erdogan. Maybe Erdogan is really the most clever person on earth. Okay? I'm not talking about Erdogan. I'm talking about this situation where one single person controls all the budget, all the ministries, all the law system, all the state, all the appointing, the job of appointing all the governors, all the deputies, all the high court officials. You wouldn't even have time to sign all of these. And then when you say, I made a mistake, then it's Titanic that happens. The transatlantic of Turkey hits the iceberg, and then it's too late. But I'm coming again. Maybe Erdogan has learned so much from his own mistakes that he admits that maybe he's never going to do any other mistake, and that he's going to run the country perfectly. It doesn't matter. You don't know if I'm going to die or not before the end of this speech. Nobody knows. Can you know if you will survive till tomorrow morning? Do you have a contract with God? You don't. I don't know either. I might die in 7 minutes. We are all mortals. We're trying to make a system that would work for a nation, hopefully forever. So if Erdogan is this fantastic person that everybody would love and would never make a mistake again in his life, and would, well, what about after Erdogan? Maybe Erdogan is going to live 40 more years. Maybe he's going to live 4 more years or 4 more months. I don't know. Nobody knows for nobody. What's going to happen? Where is all this power going to go? What happens if it goes into the hands of another Fethullah Gülen? What happens? This is what we must ask as question to the people who still say yes. What happens if this power, okay, you trust Erdogan. Let's say that you love Erdogan, you trust Erdogan. I respect it. I respect it. It's democracy, okay? What happens after him? What happens after him? It might be in 4 days, 4 months, 4 years, 5 years. What happens after him? When all this power goes into the hands of somebody that maybe will want to sell out Turkey, maybe will want to put Turkey into the worst war, in the worst possible world wars, or maybe is going to open the doors to this or that imperialist country and have Turkey be eaten. How do you know? How can you give so much power to one single person? This is what we must ask to anybody who wants to vote and think yes. It's not a matter of Erdogan. Anybody who says no to this system, tomorrow he can go and vote for Erdogan again if he wants. He can vote for AKP. It's okay. But this much power this country has not even given to its founder and has not given to Atatürk. And Atatürk didn't want this much power either, and he said the power belongs to the people. Egemenlik kayıtsız şartsız milletindir. Now, this power that was given to the people after the Ottoman Empire, taken from the Padişah, taken from the Halife, given to the people who choose their own deputies and to the people who choose their own representatives in the parliament. This power now, we want to close down the file and give all of it to one single human being. And then you know what we say? Oh, this is not a change of regime. It's not. It's just a change of system. Do you think it's a change of regime? I'm asking you.
Well,
What? Yes?
eventually it's gonna change this regime too, you know? It's not just like one like presidential system. So he's not gonna stop after referendum. If people say yes, he's not gonna stop. He's gonna go more harder. That's what I understand. And he's gonna start to change the regime. Maybe I'll give like 2 years, maybe less than 2 years. Then
If you ask me,
Turkey Republic gonna fall. So.
if you ask me, when the parliament doesn't have any real serious power anymore,
No power.
and when the power of the people is not anymore represented in the parliament, there is anyway already a change of regime. Yes, Rene?
I think that the balance has to go towards women because they control men. And that is my philosophy. There are three forces that control us. Politicians, religion, and sex. And women make men transparent. They look like guacamole when they want the favors of somebody that they care for. Men recognize that as a weakness because a man can just say, if you do that again, I will kill you, I will beat you up, and he's stronger than you and all that. But when he confronts a woman, if he wants something from her, he has to say, me out. He has to be nice. He has to be tender. And as long as we keep on excluding women, as religions do and politicians do, from the seat of power, we will get wars, wars, wars, because all these wars show that we are the strongest, the most powerful, the biggest genitals, and you know, who knows what we think we're going to do. But you cannot control women. And that's the problem. So as long as we keep on excluding them, we'll never have equality in any place anymore.
Well, women can be the ones who suffer the most if this change of regime happens. We know that. You want to say
Yes.
something?
I have a question. Is kind of, my question to you is it chicken or egg? Meaning, for example, when right after Bülent Ulusu, Özal came and I was 10 years old. And then he was the face of like West compared to, you know, like old times. And then we all of a sudden we realized in years that it was kind of true because most of his cabinet was then the part of Refah Partisi.
Yeah.
So he was popular, and then I realized throughout the years that Turkey's face is not radical but conservative right. This is the nature of Turkey being conservative right. So for a while, I felt like even like in 2006 when I went to do my military service for 3 weeks, in a short period of time, I saw like there is a mosque in Burdur, and you cannot go to prayers, but they left the door open for those who want to go. And when they ask where are those people, they say, oh, they're, you know, they will be back.
You mean in the army?
Yeah, this is happening in Burdur.
Yeah. This is where I did my army too.
Oh yeah, you know. So I say like, you know, people know, but they don't want to hear, they don't want to see. They let them go do their stuff, you know, because you know at the end they are, everybody, you know, they are Muslim. So they don't want to stop them. So I feel like Turkey is going back to its roots. Unfortunately, you know, I felt like I went to Istanbul Erkek Lisesi, and you know, all my teachers were Germans, and I spent like almost every summer in Germany. I said like, what does Turkey have anything to do with Germany? What do we have anything to do with Austria, Österreich? You know, it's like we are Turks and we are not part of Europe, literally. We face to Europe, but we are not part of their culture and religion. But we should have our own identity. People who want to be part of Europe didn't really know what Europe was. They had like this utopic idea, yeah, we should go, you know, be part of European Union. I never thought it would be possible. Now, you know, I don't think Tayyip Erdogan is changing anything. He's not changing the regime. I guess he's like rewinding it back what people used to be, and took a pause for a while, you know, enjoying the republic, democracy and everything. Now that time is over, and he says like, you know what, you used to be Ottoman anyway, and you used to have a Khalifa and Padishah anyway, and we are going back to that.
Yeah, but France could also go back to the time of its king. Is this what you mean?
Well,
like
they
before
don't miss it, but
1789, why not?
They don't. I don't think the French and Germans don't want. They don't. Even my personal opinion, even most of the Germans, they miss the Third Reich, but they don't openly say it. But in Turkey, we had a time that you know, they didn't want to say it out loud, but now they do.
You were describing world wars. You know that? Are you realizing that you are describing the whole atmosphere and context of world wars? You would say, yeah, why don't we come back to the Third Reich and to Hitler? Why doesn't Spain go back to Franco? Why doesn't Turkey go back to a regime that didn't even that's not even comparable to the Ottomans? So Trump is another man who is ready for any provocation. With this kind of thinking and getting away from democracy and freedom and equality and secularism and freedom of speech, you would only collect millions of deaths. You would only collect world wars. You would only collect, unfortunately, a suicidal nonsense situation that would lead, especially with its actual ethnic and religious differences, to a situation even much worse than the First or Second World Wars. It's more than suicidal. Yes?
Sorry, I just try to respond to my friend's conclusion about Turkey.
Can you
talk
louder?
a little loud,
I'm sorry.
please? Yeah.
Oh, I just want to say something about my friend and about the roots of Turks. If Turks want to go to their roots back, maybe they have to pass the Arab before the Islam. Yeah, that's why we although we don't have same roots with Europeans, we don't have same roots with the Arabics too. Huh?
True, definitely true.
That's why we have to understand how far we should go back if we want to go back. And Europeans, Germans should ask themselves how much they want to go back.
Sure.
I don't think any human being has to go back. We have to go forward.
Even maybe US still should ask themselves the same question.
Yeah.
So
Jim, you want to say?
Having lived in Turkey,
but I want to say something about your overall discussion. I believe the Turkish leftist politicians made many mistakes that led us to this situation, this AKP government and Mr. Erdogan's dictatorship. But I think you miss some points. Huh? There is a trend in the world that many countries and nations become much more conservative, and as my friend suggests, the nationalism rises everywhere, in Europe, in Arabic region, and unfortunately there are many interventions from outside of these countries, from US, from UK, from imperialist powers. That's why there is a big shift especially in our region, in Turkey, in Middle East. There are many other fundamental problems behind our problems in Turkey. And I think
Well, Europe and the West, they have opened the path to Erdogan, and they have supported and backed Erdogan because they were hoping to have a soft Islam bumper in this region of the world. Whereas we explained that soft Islam, this type of soft Islam, was a dream. It didn't exist. And Europe now is going under the shock of encountering Europe and the West, is surprised to encounter a new phase and a few phases of Erdogan that they had not calculated. So I think that the reality of the world, different ethnic and religious flux, also made a major mistake in the assessment of the Turkish situation and the Middle East situation overall. Jim, I think you want to say something. Jim Ryan is an American author and a friend of ours with his wife Huda, and he comes to all those discussions and meetings at in my art center in Pyramid as well. So he makes me feel home.
About Turkish democracy and the parliament and the election coming. I remember Erdogan understanding this presidency that he wants as a federation, like America's federation. And federation in America means the states, or the provinces in Turkey's case, have rights of their own that the federal government does not have. In Turkey, the party that wins the majority automatically controls the provinces. They have governors there. In Turkey, I can't remember or even think of one item that a democratic parliament raised that stopped Erdogan for one moment. It seems that he's been on a continuing rise without a step even anticipating a fall. For example, the Democratic Parliament, the opposition parliament, during Gezi Park would not even go to Gezi Park because the leader of the party said it would be too political a move. I mean, there's never been hope in Turkey. There's never, that I've been there 15 years, there was never one bit of hope except for that Gezi Park movement, which fired the young people and the old people, everyone, children, into the streets. And the leader of the opposition consistently denied that it was an important event. He would send representatives. They would be photographed with tears from gas coming down. Some of them women even, you know. That was the extent of their involvement. So my question is, he already has all of the powers. He's already destroyed the military under the Democratic Parliament. He's already destroyed the courts under the Democratic Parliament. So what's left? Make him what he is.
Theoretically, the system has the right and capacity to counter him, to say no in the parliament, or to judge him, theoretically. He wants to become theoretically untouchable. You know, there's a film, The Untouchables. He wants to become theoretically totally untouchable. Now, anybody who looks at Turkey's situation, let's say that this is Turkey in 2008, 2009, judiciary system and political system. This is the 2010 referendum. We call this one phase A, this one phase B, what we went through now. And this is, if 2017 referendum passes, we'll go to a phase C, okay? Now, the president and the power structure in 2008 in phase A, they were much more vulnerable against the law. They were more vulnerable to counterattacks of the law, or of the Constitution Court, or of the prosecutors, or high court officials, etc. And phase B is what we went through, is when the clash between Erdogan and FETÖ happened, whereas all the FETÖ people were infiltrated to Erdogan's systems during his own reign, including the army, including the police, and including the judiciary system. Now, if we reach to phase C, control is over. This is like you can go through red lights and you can speed with 400 kilometers per hour, and you can run over 5 persons on the way, and you can do whatever you want. There is no fine, no control, nothing, not even a break if you don't want to break, nothing. This is what he wants. What he wants is this uncontrolled situation where he would do anything he wants and absolutely no counter gesture would come, not even theoretically. A question, I will come to you. A question, if tomorrow the highest, the no's win in Turkey, what's going to happen on the 17th of April? Still the president is Erdogan. The cabinet and the ministers are AKP. The prime minister is still AKP. The governors are his. He still controls everything, you know?
Next year again.
Yeah, I mean, don't think that if Higher wins tomorrow, your party or CHP or another party is going to rule Turkey. No, it's going to be all the same. He just doesn't want, coming to your question, he just even doesn't want the theoretical counterbalance or the theoretical answer, the theoretical 1 in 1,000 risk that he doesn't want to run into. And he wants to nominate, appoint everything and everybody as he would choose his own personal secretary at home, or driver, or, you know, accountant clerk for the whole country. That's the answer. You want to say something?
Yes, so when you said stage C, and I was just thinking, do you think there's any chance of a civil war happening in Turkey? I mean, if there's a yes, I feel like the liberal youth, they either have to leave or resist. And I just feel like, you know, it's on the table. What do you think?
My choice would never be a civil war. I honestly don't think that especially in these days, with a power structure controlling all the armed forces of the country, a civil war would be a bloodshed, you know. And I don't think that a civil war can be an exit for any country. I don't believe it. But there has to be political opposition and resistance. I have, in 2003, I almost became the leader of CHP. It's a long story, but I almost became, and in the last minute, Baykal changed the statutes of the party 2 hours before the election of the president to stop me. Okay? So I could have been I could have been ruling CHP, or even now I talk to Kılıçdaroğlu, and what would I do, or what do I advise him? I would have said that situation and context deserves 1 million person marching. 1 million person marching in the streets of Ankara, Istanbul, doing their legal manifestation for the protection of their rights, of their voting rights, of their citizenship rights, and their democratic rights, their Republican rights, but we don't do it. Okay, this is now what's happening in Turkey is that everybody is leading his own campaign. Okay, that's fine too. All the lobby pressure groups work on their own. All the different parties work on their own, small or big, but not a party. A party should be just a pushing, should start a pushing momentum to make a big manifestation, a big walk, a big march, legally, totally legally, because this is, you're going to one of the, not one of them, the most important referendum. Is like saying to be or not to be. You want to live or not? You want to be asked anything else? If you say yes to this question on the 16th of April, after the 17th, nobody is going to ask you any other questions. The time of the questions will be over. Mr. Erdogan or whoever will sit in that chair after him, Mr. Abdullah, Mr. Mehmet, Mr. Abdurrahim, whatever. He will do whatever he wants. And next thing you know, all the things that you say, oh, it's not impossible, that would not happen in Turkey. All these things would happen. Then after that, sky is the limit. Also, sky is the limit for going backwards, down to the center of the earthquake, unfortunately. Yes?
I don't think civil war is going to happen because it requires two armed factions. And one part of the opposition is not even armed. I think if the no vote carries, it's just wait and see until it collapses from within, because for the first time, something will have stopped him. And then his own organization may gradually crumble, and then there will be opportunity for civil action. But if it comes to fighting in the streets,
no,
it's
I don't
no
believe
contest.
it. Yeah,
No
I don't believe it. With your permission, I will go quite fast with the questions and answers. Later, I will see you anyway. I will sign some books for those of you that want. And I will talk about these as well. But now, if I make sometimes shorter answers, forgive me, so that I have a chance to ask more people among you.
Hi, thank you very much. So you started talking as an artist, and your history. So what did you...
I will end up talking like an artist too.
Okay.
But let's make, at least that'll be my excuse.
I've been thinking a lot about art in terms of political action. And, you know, I've been thinking about the Dadaist and there was anti-fascist art. And, you know, I look at people's posters and the marches and stuff, and I'm wondering, what do you think is the most effective political art for these times? Because even though we have a much lighter situation here, this lack of separation of the powers is totally parallel in the states that you're talking about. So as an artist, what do you like right now? What are you inspired by to do visually? Or
in 1987, 1990, 1994, 98, I have done big political shows. I'll show you in a few books. I've done big political shows with like Box of Democracy, soundtracks, and newspapers blown up and repainted over, participation of the viewer, referendum box, installation to 5 senses, like exhibitions with sound, with smell, with tactile things that you can touch. exhibitions that create an aura, an environment, an atmosphere. I did, for instance, an exhibition about the assassination of JFK. Well, in this room, Jim has seen it, and his wife. For instance, this was an exhibition again that created a total atmosphere where you invite the viewer not just to look at a painting, but to be in an atmosphere where you have different videos, soundtracks, all the information is coming to you, and you're reading on the walls, you're listening a soundtrack, you're watching different videos at the same time, and you're watching different paintings. And it's as if, for instance, you were in Dallas in 1963. When you go out of that door, it's as if you just came back to 2013 and just left Dallas again, because all the walls totally were covered by the newspapers of the day, etc. It was one of the ever biggest researches done on the Kennedy assassination. Same things that I did about the independence war of Turkey, or the revolution of '60, or the Turkish '68 movement that unfortunately the West has very much hidden. For instance, the Turkey is the only country who had his own Che Guevara, Deniz Gezmiş, that all these people know and respect. And nobody in the world knows it. Because the Western cultural imperialisms even sometimes hits this kind of subjects. Like heroes, not from this part of the world. But it's this type of very active art. This is how I envision it, and this is how I have done it. Yes, please.
I have a question about Kemalist ideas and how you talked about Second Republic and how there was a major discontent between Kemalists and Second Republic ideas. I just wanted to, you talked about how there was division between these powers who could have united and made difference in Turkish politics. But in terms of the political agenda in the 90s, don't you think there was monopoly over ideological ideas in Turkey? I do myself, I agree with very much what Kemalists stand for and the way Turkey used to be in the 90s and liberalist ideas. But I also see how some of the groups may have been ignored or may have been marginalized by those ideas, like the Kurds, like the Alevis, like the groups which did not really agree or did not benefit from those ideas, and how that could have benefited to the rise of this movement that led to Erdogan's rise, because let's agree that he is popular among the people support him, people want him to be in power, and people vote for him. So it's not like it's falsified in the case of Aliyev or our country, where I come from, because we don't have elections, we don't have true democracy where people really vote. It's falsified, as you might know.
Where you say?
I come from Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Turkey, he is popular. So don't you agree that the monopoly of liberal ideas, of Kemalist ideas, where those religious groups, those ethnic minorities were marginalized, were discriminated against, because you would also agree that religion was completely in terms of the education, in terms of the mainstream culture, religion was completely ignored in Turkey. And that might have led to this type of discontent where those people now taking over what they think used to be injustice against them. And because they're majority, you look at Anadolu, you look at the rural areas of Turkey, and you see those people who would support Erdogan, who would not be supporting liberal ideas or what you see in Istanbul.
Well, to answer you in depth, we would need another 3-hour panel discussion. But to answer you, unfortunately, very briefly, the point is, unfortunately, when you start dividing the country between Alevis, Sunnis, Shiites, now atheists, this, that, you end up getting a country that's not thinking in terms of who needs hospital, who needs roads, who needs education, who needs soccer fields, basketball fields, who needs a museum. By the way, no government has ever done a museum, neither modern nor contemporary in Turkey. Only private sector has done few things in the last 15 years. So instead of thinking in those terms, when you start thinking in terms of ethnicity and religion, what you get back and what you try to stick together becomes always subject to middle-age type of middle-age type of discussions, middle-age type of differences. If you want to go back to middle-age saying who is Kurd, you know, the story of the Kurds, again, I will try to make it very short. Now, people think that in Turkey there's Turks and Kurds, and that the Turks are, you know, pressuring the Kurds or trying to oppress them, and that the Kurds want the Kurdistan and they want to annex it. It has nothing to do with reality. Like, people of the world think like this. It has nothing to do with reality. Most of the Kurds live in Istanbul. They live in Izmir. They live in Trabzon. They live all over the country. They live in the agency. And if tomorrow I say, hey, okay, we are sick and tired of this war, I'll cut it out. I'll give you, let's make an open referendum, name by name. Each of you, you can go there and leave Turkey and go live in Kurdistan. I'll give it to you. None of them would go. None. This is a lie that has been enforced, unfortunately, to all the people of the world, and to Europe, and to Holland, and to France, and to Britain. None of them would go. None of them would leave the Bosphorus or Fenerbahce or Beşiktaş or Izmir or Cordon or Ankara. They would never go. They have their house, they have their friends, they have their kebab restaurant. None of them would go. It's a lie. You have been, and it's not your fault that you think like this. The international media writes the same articles over and over for you to think like this. You understand? And for the religion, me, Bedri Baykam, avant-garde, radical, expressionist, multimedia, whatever artist, I was born and I grew in a house with two different grandmothers in two different cities, each very religious, always respectful of Bayrams, always respectful of people going to the mosque. You know, this is the atmosphere we live in. This is also unfortunately invented as if Atatürk and the Kemalist people were enemies of religion or enemies of the mosques. No, everybody was doing his prayer or fasting or going to mosques. Everybody respected that. And trust me, 30 years ago, religion was much more a respectful field because politics and money were not infiltrated in religion, were not, unfortunately, shadowing over religion. Religion was something in the heart, in the brain. When somebody died, you prayed to God and you wanted to help, or you helped poor people and you gave them some money, and you want religion to be a solidarity, not a way of war. Unfortunately, this is, again, the brainwashing that they did as if the Kemalist or the secularist approach was an enemy to religion. Trust me, it had nothing to do with that. None of that. Please.
You mentioned about the pessimistic scenario of what may happen after April 17, when the results are yes. So is there a better option if it's no, and like there will be early election, and hopefully in the future he's gone and you or Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu is a vice president?
The vice president?
Prime
To
Minister,
Erdogan?
one of the major
No way.
president and the vice president. So Prime Minister, so is there, bright future that if the result is no and
The world is always subject to many surprises. There are bad surprises. We kept living them for too long, the bad surprise. If I was very good in statistics at the Sorbonne. Okay, I was the best student in statistics. Statistics makes that if I throw heads or tails, heads, the next time I throw, it's heads again. If the third time I throw is heads again, the fourth time, there is more chance of tails of coming. It's not equal anymore. If there is 5 times tails, the next time, if it's 5 times heads, the next time, you can calculate that the opportunity of tails coming will be maybe 75–80% and not 50%. So maybe we will have, for once, we will have a good surprise. Who knows? One way or the other. Maybe AKP will change its policies. Maybe they will have a new leader. Maybe, we cannot even imagine. But all I'm saying is that we don't need always bad surprises. But if the result is yes, my pessimism, I did not say that the Kemalist people or the Republican people or the liberal people or the people searching for equality, I didn't say that they would resign from their struggling position. I didn't say that. I said this is what Erdogan will want and will try to do. I did not say we would give up. You and then Jim. You.
I have a question about CHP party. How Kılıçdaroğlu and the ideology of CHP can stop Erdogan without just trying to educate people and going to tell only the problems but not the solutions. And also would relate to that, if April 17th gives civil people gives no, that will be in my perspective it would be like a gift to Turkish people, people like us. And I think Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu has to take this advantage and try to do really something in terms of the actions. So what could be those actions, and how could he solve this Erdogan issue?
Again, this is another 2.5 hour problem of CHP, about which I'm an expert. I will only give you a short answer that will cover you. If Kılıçdaroğlu makes the same mistake he did after Gezi Park, and when all the youth was in motion and wanted to do something to try to democratize Turkey and free Turkey, after Gezi, the social democrat, my dear American friend, I'm talking to you, our social democrat leader has chosen another Islamist as a candidate to put in front of Erdogan. He chose Ekmelettin. He chose Ekmek için Ekmelettin story. Now, this was the ever worse choice. I hope he learned from his mistakes, and I hope that he's not going to do the mistake he did after Gezi Park with the Ekmelettin İhsanoğlu story, and that he will try to catch the zeitgeist in this resistance within the air. Last few questions, Jim, and then very fast. Go ahead.
Erdogan and the Federal District Court, the Southern District of New York, still has yet to finish their investigation. They're squeezing somebody named Zarab, who on money laundering, and they have yet to issue a list of who they might indict, and they have yet to list a name Erdogan as one of the people indicted. So that's coming soon.
We'll see.
The trial
We'll
is
see.
coming soon.
Not soon enough, obviously.
You?
I would like to know what you think about Turkish media in general, or also in like during the refining process.
Turkish media, unfortunately.
Since you had problems in the past publishing your articles and
Yeah.
Even
Well,
though
now again, that's another subject of 2.5 hours. I will be very short again. I've been subject to all sorts of pressures. My friends have been killed. Uğur Mumcu, Muammer Aksoy, Ahmet Taner Kışlalı, all those writers and political activists have been killed. I survived an attack miraculously 6 years ago. I was saved by an unbelievable doctor when I was stabbed almost to death in 2011. Besides that, we have been going censorship, as you said, in the media, who wanted us not to be able to reach the general public. Now, the long story, which I will cut as a line, and we'll talk more if you want outside, is that there was a mistake done. I don't write anymore in Cumhuriyet because Can Dündar, who was a yetmez ama evet person, before he was in jail or Germany, when he came to power, he started eliminating the Kemalist people from Cumhuriyet, including me, including Mustafa Balbay, and other people. So even there we've had problems. I'm writing in Oda TV web news channel, Oda TV. So it has been our life to encounter threats, assassination attempts, censorships. It's funny, it's like swimming in in a sea with huge waves and counter waves, and it's crazy. We're so used to swimming in it that we think it's normal. I even found out 1.5 years ago that the FETÖ organization had my paper ready, which the HSYK person has shown me, that they had prepared another page full of lies to put me in prison exactly like Balbay and Tuncay Özkan, and with the same wordings, and associating me with people I had never even heard the name of. So you learn to live in the middle of this, but it's a pity that the Turkish media is so ridiculously scared of the power structure and of Erdogan and in general of the power structure. They don't have the capacity, and they lost their capacity since AKP came to power. They had many occasions to defend their own rights, and they lost those opportunities. You, and then you.
Yeah, it was like about 2008, 2009 when Ergen Ekonen.
Last two questions, you, and then we go. We go to the books. Go.
Ergen Ekonen Balyos cases.
Yes.
I went to a conference in Istanbul. I was eating little girl back then. And Şer Batum, Nur Serter and İşçi Partisi'nin başkanı olan şu Doğu Perinçek'le
Right.
I went to Nur Serter because she was a woman, so I felt like I could close to her. Asked her, why, like, I listen to you, I don't have like really high vocabulary. I do not understand, like, what's the point that you're trying to get to the viewers. But at that time, it was like a really rising golden age of AKP. They took like really simple, people understand. You know what was her answer to me? We don't care. The people who doesn't understand, let them not understand us. And that was 2008, where everything could have been different. It was not too late.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that when you talk to somebody, you have talked only as much as the people in front of you have understood you. You can talk about how to make an atomic bomb, but if the persons in front of you do not have the codes and the access to this treatment of this information, then you talk as if you talk to emptiness. So what your criticism is right. So in every context, you should talk according to the context. You're right. Last question.
Have you heard of any polls about the referendum, and you think it can be rigged?
The polls, I keep hearing some officially but hidden and some unofficially, is that at this point the no's are ahead like at least 3-4 points. But that doesn't mean that we should go to holiday saying, oh good, we were winning. No, we have to work every single moment in order to convince the butcher, the taxi driver, the bekçi, the guard, your dentist, whoever. Even your friends who say, oh, what do I care? I'm not going to vote. I'm just going to France. No, you have to come and vote no matter what you vote. So convince. Kılıçdaroğlu told me a week ago when we talked, he said 30% of the people who read Hürriyet and 25% of the people who read Sözcü don't come to vote. Now that's huge. That is huge, and that is very dangerous. This is our biggest danger. The people who will not go to vote. Okay? Thanks very much for your attention.
We also ask the number of Turkish students.
Yes.
We would like to give you this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming. There will be a book sale and signing.
You know, I will, to those of you who want, I will give my card and my email, and I will take yours so that we have an open line going on, and I'll do that near the painting.